This is a $450 candy bar. It's made from just 2 ingredients, cacao and sugar, and weighs under 2 ounces. Sure, it comes in nice packaging, complete with an original print by artist Oswaldo Guayasamín.
It's like my engagement ring.
Oh my God. All right, this is the big moment. But the reason it's so expensive is because it comes from a cacao tree found deep in the Ecuadorian rainforest that is so rare it was thought to be extinct. Just because something's expensive and rare doesn't mean it's worth the money. Cacao from Ecuador's Nacional trees is known to produce chocolate with incredibly bright yet complex floral notes and has been consumed for centuries by the cultural elite of societies from Mayan and Aztec royalty to European monarchs.
So Nacional cacao is really a legendary cacao. It traces its genetic lineage back more than 5,300 years.
It's hard to convey just how rare this chocolate is. There are only 175 bars of this chocolate in the world. In the late 1800s, Ecuadorian chocolate was famous throughout Europe.
All of the top European chocolatiers at the time in the late 1800s and early 1900s would come to Ecuador or send their people to Ecuador to source a very particular variety of cacao called Nacional, which was famed for having a floral aroma and a very complex flavor profile.
Then, in 1916, disaster struck in the form of 2 plagues, witch's broom and ammonia. The Nacional trees were decimated. But in 2013, James LeCompte, founder of Toac Chocolate, says a 4th-generation Ecuadorian told him about a remote valley deep in the rainforest, dotted with century-old cacao farms. Rumors swirled that in the furthest reaches on the oldest farms, you could still find pure Nacional trees.
We met with those farmers, 13 smallholder farmers, and they pointed out the oldest trees on their properties. And these are not cacao farms with rows and rows of trees.
He says the group took core samples from 47 old-growth trees and sent them to USDA laboratories for testing.
And from their analysis, 9 of them were 100% genetically pure Nacional. And so for us, that was kind of like a little Indiana Jones moment in our small world of cacao and chocolate.
James and his team were able to identify 570 100% Nacional trees, which he used to produce the $450 chocolate bar. The chocolate from the Nacional tree is nothing like the ultra-processed stuff we're used to in the US, where a premium is paid for sameness. Even companies that tout expensive chocolate like Mass Brothers and Jacques Torres are prized for their consistency. But like high-end wine, each vintage of Nacional chocolate is prized for its complex flavors, which are impacted by everything from seasonal rain and temperature to elevation and soil mix. The chocolate in Toac's $450 bar takes years to produce. After the cacao is picked, it's fermented for 6 days. The ketones in cacao are separated, the cacao laid to dry in the sun for 2 weeks. The cacao is then rested for up to 1 year before being ground into nibs, which eventually becomes a thick, viscous liquid due to the high fat content.
Fats are really important to store flavors and release them when we're cooking. We can see the same sort of phenomenon in chocolate aging.
Pure sugar cane is added to the raw cacao and blended for 24 hours in a process called crunching. The chocolate is then removed and aged for 5 years before it's tempered and packaged. But the chocolate in the art edition is even more special than that.
We use 2 different editions of our chocolate, what we refer to as our 2015 Harvest Light and our 2015 Harvest Dark. They're 2 editions that are really emblematic of Nacional cacao.
I'm not even going to pretend that I can tell if this chocolate is worth $450 for 1.76 ounces. So I met up with a bona fide chocolate expert, Oded Brenner, at his Blue Stripes Urban Cacao shop in Manhattan. If anyone can tell me if this is worth the money, it's Oded. This is the culmination of craft, of art, of price, exclusivity. So there's only 175 of these. I want to see your reaction to what this is like when we open it.
So, when you buy chocolate, you buy it like you pick jewelries and stuff like this. And I think here they took it to a totally different level. As a chocolate maker for the last 30 years, it's unbelievable.
All right, this is the big moment.
So the cocoa bean inside.
Okay, let's really try this. I'm gonna give it a smell. It's a little too subtle for me to pick up.
Too subtle.
Okay.
It's very delicate, like very, very.
Very delicate.
I was actually expecting much more fruity notes. It's very different than any chocolate I tried. It's very, very subtle. Usually in a 77%, you feel a much more aggressive cacao flavor. A judgment to something like this is very much aligned with the mood. To me, it's the holistic experience. And I think whoever did the work here, it's one of the most beautiful craftsmanship that I've seen in the world of culinary kind of art.
For a novice, it's a rounder flavor than I was expecting. I had no feeling or sensation of, oh, this is too pure, it needs sugar, it needs milk, it needs anything else to it. I think like from the tree to the bar, this comes really close, I hate to say it, to what I'm more accustomed to. This is like a very high-end, pure version of what these companies try really hard to recreate.
To me, the price is about the product, but the product is not the chocolate. The product is the art of making something so fine. I'm a chocolate maker, and I know a lot about chocolate, but I consider myself a chocolate storyteller. This person, Toak, who made it, to me are kind of the Tolstoy of making chocolate, like in a way of a chocolate storyteller to a chocolate storyteller. There is something very classic here.
I think the flavor notes are too subtle for just somebody off the street to really try it. It's ridiculous, but man, if this is what you're into, it's definitely worth the money.
Absolutely.
All right. The chocolate was smooth and fragrant. The floral notes were subtle but lingered. It was not bitter in the least, which, when you consider is almost 80% pure cacao, is incredible. But there is no way I'm going to tell you to spend $450 on this chocolate bar. The experience of eating it was amazing, but place and setting matter. If I had that bar at home, I don't think it would have left nearly as big of an impression on me. But did you see Oded's face?
It's a totally different experience of a chocolate bar. So you see just the level of detail is like so incredible. Like really so incredible.
He is an incredibly hard person to impress when it comes to chocolate, and I don't think he's ever experienced anything quite like Toak's Art Series chocolate bar.